But while you're getting in there, let me know where you're joining from. It'd be great to hear kind of where people are at, and yeah, just what's your location like, and then if you want to share a little bit about what you've been doing in social isolation that you usually don't do, I'd love to hear that as well. So I've been baking bread. And I'm getting the garden ready at this point too. So we're getting into full social isolation mode. And Dave, yes, hashtag flip the cushions. North Carolina, awesome. Used to live in Raleigh. Oh, sourdough, awesome. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna start
Awesome.
sharing.
Well, while you're getting your screen ready to go to share, I'm going to just do a little brief introduction of you, Andrew. I think I met you at the party in December and then again at A2ATD where I saw your presentation. Um, I was really, really, really excited. I was texting Megan the entire time that you were presenting to see practical applications of using xAPI and really meaningfully, right? So you were able to track which videos were worth investing time and resources into, and that was really exciting to me. So everyone, this is Andrew McGuire. He's a learning experience designer who specializes in developing engaging content and tracking learner experiences. He has been working in e-learning development for the past 7 years. Before joining the world of e-learning, he taught English at the college level for 7 years. He holds an MA in English composition from Northeastern Illinois University. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Andrew, and I'm really excited to learn more about using video and xAPI to deliver results.
Awesome. Yeah. So cool to be here. Just want to confirm audio and my screen share looking good.
Sure is.
Yes. I'm getting yeses. Awesome. Very cool. Um, so we're gonna kind of dive in. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what this is all about. But Basically, for me, at the heart of this was, you know, I've attended cohorts and I've learned about xAPI, and there was this real moment where I realized that, you know, it wasn't limited to the box that that instructional design, e-learning, learning and development has at times been limited to, where you know things are purely going for through the LMS. You know, I was really amazed that you could get learning interaction data. You could provide learning experiences for people where they're at. And that once I learned about that, had some experience doing it, that was something that I really wanted to share. And so it's always cool to be able to participate and share and talk about this work. Um, so what are we going to cover? First, I want to talk about the what and why of xAPI. So if you were in Megan's session, that's great. We're going to cover some of that similar material, but we're going to go beyond and talk a little bit about a specific use case that I was able to implement and with the team. And then we're also going to talk about what is it, what are the steps, what are some things that you can do to develop a proof of concept that's really going to drive value. And then once you have that, what's the next step, right? So what do you go beyond that? So data visualizations, and really things that deliver results, and then also resources, right? So for me, I'm always collecting new things, whether it's bookmarks or just kind of resources that I find interesting, and being able to have a catalog of things to draw on has really been an important part of me being able to kind of develop in this journey with xAPI. Before we jump into that, you know, we're all kind of out here on our own. I'd love to hear how are you doing? So if you could let me know on a scale of 1 to Matthew McConaughey, you know, how are you doing? Like 1 through 9, where you at right now. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. Let me know like just how things are going. And just to let everybody know, I think I'm at 8 or maybe a 9. Okay. So hopefully no one is doing the interstellar weeping in front of the computer screen today. Never a fun time. Uh, I was a little disappointed too that I found this meme online that Dazed and Confused was not on here, but this to True Detective. So that's for the 8 people in this session that actually watched True Detective. Uh, um, I'm glad there's a call out for a self haircut too. So moving along. So let's start with the question, right? Why track learning outside of an LMS, right? People are, I'm sure, producing learning content that is not living inside the LMS. That was what the team at LLamasoft was doing. So we were making videos. Those videos were like bite-sized tutorials that were for the product that we were doing. So LLamasoft has a pretty complex product where you have to put in a ton of data to get outputs. And so part of those videos were actually living and they were going into our help system. Well, so we didn't have any control over how how that was getting consumed. And so what happened was we were creating videos. Those videos were going into our help system, and then we didn't really have any visibility into how they were being utilized. So that was the insight that we were looking for. But additionally, we, you can see from this screenshot of the actual help, this became like a it's an open web environment. So if you Google process modeling supply chain guru, it will actually, that result will come up. And so we knew that a lot of people were coming to that system. There had been some Google Analytics that had been put on that, but we really didn't have that clear like end-to-end navigation with videos. So we knew that we wanted to kind of track people and have them learn where they were at. And we knew that video was a great way to get at that, but we didn't have that data. So why video? Kind of touched on this, but really it actually serves itself very well for living outside of the LMS. Through email or hosting, there's a lot of way to kind of disperse video and get people exposed to that. But also, there's a ton of interaction data. So as soon as I play, I can know when that session starts, right? So I can see, okay, what do they do? Do they pause? Do they mute? Do they go full screen? Do they go back and do they rewatch something? So there's a ton of data that we can get from that. Additionally, because of the way that video is produced, and we'll kind of dive into this a little bit deeper, it's actually fairly easy to kind of plug in xAPI into that format. Also, video is very easy to host. And so an MP4 kind of in a wrapper on AWS, we're going to talk about all that stuff as well, is a pretty simple process. And also right now, video is king, right? So whereas a lot of people were really focused on like production value. Right now, I am seeing a ton of content in my feeds, whether it's on Twitter or on LinkedIn, of just people recording videos in their home and just talking about a process. Being able to then get data about that video that's been produced and review it and see how that interaction is working has really been awesome. Okay. Now I've been seeing a little bit of this in the chat, but basically like as we're going through this, like don't be afraid to put in like what you're looking for out of video as well. Now, okay, so within so hosting a video on YouTube is going to be different than doing that in a separate format. I'll talk about that later as well. Okay, so Megan did a great job talking about this. I also want to kind of outline a little bit for folks that aren't as familiar with xAPI or are just starting to get exposed to it. I want to talk a little bit about what it is. So xAPI, think of it as a grammar. Think of it as a way to structure and report on information and interactions that take place with learning products. So if I've got this grammar, I've got my actor. So an individual does something, and they do that on an object. So I have completed an e-learning course, or some other examples like Laura. Let's say we want to know, Laura's part of our new hire group, and I want to know not only did she watch the workplace safety video, but maybe how long did that process take, or did she pause? And then Mark's part of a compliance training group, and I want to know if he clicked the I agree button on the end of that compliance statement. But how does it actually work, right? So what I like to think of this is like a three-part process where there's a sensor that's in JavaScript, so that's a bit of code that's on that web object. So you know, an e-learning course, there's an HTML output for that. You can put in a sensor as a trigger within that course, and you can get that output. A video, video statements, video interactions with the web player, that triggers something to happen, or you can set it up so JavaScript can trigger something, and it captures that moment. Okay, so we've got our JavaScript sensor, and then that's going to package things up into a JSON statement. So sensor to package, and then finally that's going to go into an LRS, a learning record store, and that's going to be where we can look at the data. We can get an idea of the type of interactions that we've got coming in, and then we can also work with that data. So this is kind of like where the party starts, right? So not only are we just getting like the views and like the base information that we might be getting from SCORM, but we're able to see, okay, how far can I take this? Where can I build off of this, and in what direction can I go? So great thing about the way that xAPI is set up with the actor verb object is there's already kind of this built-in aggregation that can take place. So for example, I've got a course, I've got a new hires, I've got 4 new hires coming in, and I want to know, did they all play or complete or pause the workplace safety video? Beyond that, then I can look at a specific individual and say, okay, did he play the series of videos that are part of the onboarding process? And then finally, I can dig in and say, okay, I know that Mark watched the video. I'm wondering what specific actions did he take? So did he full screen it? Did he pause it? Did he go back? Did he mute it at any point? And from that, I can really get kind of these in-depth reactions that we're looking for. Okay. So how did this start, right? So at LLamasoft, we had the challenge of a video. We knew that we wanted to get more interaction data, and so what we did was we developed a proof of concept. We knew that if we could get something working, so a prototype working, and we could start testing that, then we could start getting data, and then we could make decisions based off that. So there's really like a 4-step process that we went through. where it was build, host, measure, and then visualize. And as you can imagine, this is kind of like a recursive, iterative process where, if as I'm building, and then hosting and measuring and visualizing and doing each of these steps, I can go back and I can reiterate on what I've already built, and I can adjust, I can make corrections, I can add more like triggers to what I've already built. But to get started with the build, I really recommend this as a resource. So this is what I used. There's an article on the Learning Solutions website, and there's the article is Getting Started with xAPI, 4 Lines of Code. It's by Anthony Altieri, and essentially what it does that's really helpful is it breaks down, okay, here is the specific code that you need to get started. So for example, here what it shows is essentially how to create a button and how to put a statement on that button. And that was where I started. So I built an HTML page, and then off of that page, put a button on it and had it send a statement to an LRS. Once I was able to do that, I was then able to build out and start looking at things like, okay, video. Let's try and do the same thing with the interactions that are coming off the media player. And so, like having this as a resource, being able to start building and then testing became like a really important step in that process. So along those lines too is the LRS. So Megan talked about the LRS. She went into great detail about that. But one of the things that she talked about too was the option of free. These are all LRSs that I've tested, that I've used, and there are often free options. I know that every one of these has demo options that you can test sending statements to, and what I found was that that sending statements to one is very similar, has been for me the exact same process across the board. So if I'm able to send a statement to one LRS, I've been able to send statements to other LRSs as well. Now, what's really helpful though is that a lot of these LRSs also come with at least some basic visualization tools, and so I'm able to clearly see one, if statements are coming in, and then beyond that, they also have a ton of documentation. So it is in these LRS's best option, or best interest to be up and get people up and running on their LRS, but also testing out with xAPI. And so they provided a ton of great resources to help people learn about this. So let's go back now to LLamasoft's specific use case. And so got some code, starting to kind of plug this in and figure out, okay, like how are we going to measure these videos? What are going to be our key statements that we want to be pulling out? And then beyond that, like what are our limitations, right? So automatically, one of our limitations that we came up with was that we knew that we weren't going to be able to get a named actor. So that means that when someone comes into our help, because it's open, because we want to make it public, we're not asking them to log into anything. Additionally, we talked to our legal teams and our IT teams, and they said that at this point we're not really comfortable with you collecting data on users. So the way that we decided to kind of work around this was just to instead of thinking about an individual actor coming in, we thought about, what happens when the video loads. And actually, what happens is the page loads and the video is on there with the player. And so what we could do was, as people came in, or as the page loaded, we went ahead and we had a random number generator set an ID for that session. Then what happened was we were able to then group that ID with all of the page behaviors that we were seeing on the video. So we were able to do something like where we've got our actor, and then we've got all the verbs that relate to that session. And then we've got all those verbs and that ID tied to the object of the video. So that looks something like this. So this is our sensor. This is our JavaScript. And then we've got the random number generator is our actor. We've then got our verb as play. And then the object is then our window, or the URL to that. So once we've got our sensor, we've captured that moment in time, then we can actually put it into our package. So this is our JSON package, and we can see again here we've got our object, our verb, and our actor, and those are all providing us information and giving us detail about the type of interaction that's taking place. So then once that has been packaged up, it's going to show up in our LRS if we've set everything up correctly. And there we've got, again, our actor, the verb, and then the object that's taking place on. And so we can really get session by session data. And that that's a pretty exciting moment. And especially for us being able to group those statements just by an ID, that became a really helpful moment where we were able to see, okay, in general, how are our videos viewed in a session? Now, we talked about building that prototype and iterating, so measuring things and then going back and revising. And some of you may be familiar with extensions. Megan talked about kind of getting that additional data. So what we were able to set up was actually these are all the extensions that we're getting from the help system of the interactions that are taking place. So we partnered with some developers. We said, hey, what's possible? We asked our UX team and our documentation team if you could get metadata or interaction data from the browser, what would you want to know? And so as a result of this, we developed this, and so that we were actually getting more robust data from there. So that was all hosted within our help system. But there was a lot of testing that we went through to get to a place where we knew that was going to be safe and function at a high level before we implemented it into our testing system. And so for testing, what I did was I created an AWS account, so Amazon Web Service, and I posted files there, and then was able to then test on those files. Additionally, I can now host videos on there or put documents on there, and I can use that as kind of a central repository to send out information to learning experiences to people as well. So for example, like I put RISE courses, I put e-learning courses like Storyline courses on AWS, and then put xAPI in them, and then I'm able to send that out and see the interactions that are taking place on those objects and keep track of them that way. Now, AWS, there's again ton of documentation, ton of resources on them. When you sign up, they're going to ask for a credit card. I get a fair bit of traffic to the instance of Amazon Web Service that I have. I paid 16 cents last month for that. So everything that I've talked about up to this point, all the resources, free trial of the LRS, AWS, this is all low or almost free cost to test this stuff out, to try and send some statements, get some data, and then build off that. So once I've kind of gotten to that point, really looked at measure and visualize. Okay, so a lot of people focus on the development phase of xAPI, and that is it's important. However, like someone who is familiar with JavaScript, or someone who has experience with xAPI and has been able to do this before, it's actually fairly straightforward, and Megan talked about this too, fairly straightforward to kind of plug that in and start getting data. What I found was most important when we were kind of saying, here's the value of what we can deliver on, was being able to do the visualizations and show show the results that we were getting from a system that had no visibility into it. So even just like answering this question, right? Does anyone watch the videos that we've produced? So let's say we've spent 40 hours producing videos, 40 man hours, which is low, right? What's the return on that investment? And that's what xAPI gave us right away. So we were able to see, how frequently, what's our most frequently played video? How long do people stay in the videos? Do they have certain interactions like full screen? And then we were able to then, the team at LLamasoft can then make decisions based off of that, right? So, is it worth updating all of our videos after a product release, right? So we've changed maybe the color, or we've changed the location of a button. So how do we prioritize that work? So what's the most urgent video that we need to go in and update? And then beyond that, how many users are going into this? So how many individual sessions do we have, right? So from that, and from the visualization that we've got on screen, which is created in Tableau. So go into the LRS, do an export, get all that data out in a raw format, and then I'm able to work with that in Tableau, Excel, or some other tool like that, and figure out, okay, what's going on here. Over time, we've been able to build dashboards within an LRS, but really just at first it was doing data polls and trying to get an idea of what those interactions were looking like. So from what's on the screen right now, we were able to go and talk to our documentation team, let them know that this is what we were seeing, talk to our legal and IT team and let them know that this is the type of data that we're collecting and this is how we're collecting it. And the result was we were able then to get permission to do things like cookies and local storage. So what that allowed us to do is not only to see how an individual session is going, but once we were able to assign a cookie, we were able to see like, okay, what do those return views look like as well? So how are people interacting with these learning products over time? And potentially what's the impact across the organization on those types of interactions? So one of the things that the LX team at LLamasoft is currently looking at is, okay, how does this utilization of these learning products connect to support tickets? Is there a drop in support tickets? Is there an increase in support tickets? What does the utilization of the help system look like overall? And really, where can we provide learning experiences that are going to make the biggest impact? So that's kind of become the challenge there, is looking at, okay, like what's next? How do we go beyond just measuring and really having an impact on overall a learning strategy, and the importance of making that content accessible and easy to gain access to. So um, so I think that like along those lines too is just the progress that we've been able to make over time, right? And the kind of the conversation that went around the adoption and the access of xAPI. So this is a story um, some data from the e-learning guild, which is now the Learning Guild, that actually Megan was a part of collecting. But most people, even within L&D, aren't really familiar with what xAPI is. And so one of the things that I found was not leading off with an explanation of what xAPI is. So kind of the opposite of what I started out with here today, because when I went to my developers and the IT, legal, they weren't really interested in the details of like what the history of SCORM is compared to xAPI. They were looking for issues like privacy concerns, um, and also, is it going to slow down the system? What's the potential downside? So is there any way that there could be issues with this going forward? And so by kind of doing our research, we're learning more about what the specification does and the impact that it can have, but additionally learning more about privacy concerns. So learning more about regulations and company policies, being able to talk to that made the biggest impact. But we LLamasoft really started out in 2017, looking at being interested in collecting more data, being interested in figuring out what this new standard was, but not really having like a specific application for it. So putting this in the video, getting this in our help system, that was actually like the first step. And then currently, we have, as I mentioned before, in RISE courses, in Storyline courses, in video, doing it on just basic websites. Though you're able to get detail about interactions from really anything that you're seeing on the web. So now, I kind of mentioned one resource that's been really helpful in terms of Anthony Altieri. I think I saw somebody in the comment or in the chat talked about how he's got a LinkedIn learning course. Absolutely, I cannot recommend that enough. Going getting for me, it was about getting a little bit of background in JavaScript, HTML, and then getting more background in xAPI as a standard, what it does and where it can go. That became really helpful. So Anthony also has an article in Learning Solutions magazine about doing this on video specifically. So he goes through the process with that. Additionally, there's a gentleman by the name of Devlin. So he's got a ton of tutorials and blogs about xAPI on his website. I really recommend just like step-by-step tutorials. So he specifically has one about storyline. So if you feel like, okay, I'm looking for how to do this, and I know I've got access to this thing, I want to do more with that, then I definitely recommend checking him out. And then obviously, Megan's been doing great work with the cohort and the party. She's got a great team that's doing exciting stuff. Um, but who can do this? Like, you can do this. I know it might sound abstract and there's a lot of challenges, but like, my experience is that um, like providing people with the information, they've been able to pick this up. So I've been able to work with individuals on my team, uh, talk to them about how this works. We've done sessions, we've done lunch and learns, and then we've just done it, right? So we sat down as a team, went through, and as we've been, adapting our content, we've been putting xAPI in it, and so right now we're running storyline files inside of a Litmus LMS, and those files are sending xAPI statements and SCORM data concurrently. So why would we want to do that, right? So one of the reasons is that SCORM data is going to give you that completion. It's going to give you that open. It's going to give you that progress. But what if I want to know, like, if somebody, what if I've got a video in my e-learning course? Or what if I've got some compliance standards? So some accessibility features. Or what if I just want to know what branch in a branching course someone selects first? So those are all things that I'm able to capture with xAPI data. I've learned that process from those resources that I put up, and by also going through this build, host, and measure and then visualize process, where testing time and time again about, okay, what do we want to collect, what's going to work, testing that out, getting a working version, and then building off of that. Okay, what additional can we get? What more data can we grab? So I've covered a ton of information, and I've been able to just glance at some of the chat. But really, I'd love to hear your questions. What do you see as the challenges? What data are you trying to collect? What do you see as being next? I'd love to hear about kind of where you see this going, and most importantly, like, thank you. Like, I definitely appreciate that, our days are busy. I don't know about you, but my days seem to be much busier. So definitely thank you for taking the time and participating in the session, participating in the cohort. I think that I marked a few things off the bingo card. I tried not to to just say things because they were on the bingo card, but okay, I'm actually gonna stop sharing, and so I can get a little bit better view of the chat. All right. Okay. What skill sets are needed to be able to build xAPI? JavaScript knowledge, other foundational knowledge sets. Excellent question. I was lucky enough to work with this gentleman, Dustin, at a previous job. Dustin taught me how to open up the output for an e-learning course and work with the HTML. So that interaction of being able to open up a file, an output file, and actually make some changes there became really important. So how did I build on that? I took coding classes where possible, and just having like a basic framework of JavaScript knowledge was super helpful. Beyond that, I would say really learning about source control and being able to like share documents that became really helpful, and that was something I really learned with in the process of like learning about AWS and hosting. Um, oh, demonstrating value. Yeah, that's a great one. Um, uh, Visual design um, of data. So being able to represent data um, in a way that's engaging has been what I've really been working on, say, for the last year. And there's just, again, there's a ton of resources about telling a story with data. And I think that that's going to be more important going forward than a lot of stuff is hey, how do I speak to especially like decision makers in a way that's going to have the most impact. And for me, it's about giving them something that's quickly digestible, but also like meaningful, and is gonna stay with them. Like what's um, what's the sticky way that I can present this? Um, yes, thank you. Zolz, thank you so much. Yes, so I use Sublime Text. Atom is also an editing tool for code, uh, um, uh, and like um, so download a text editor that lets you know uh, if you've got your code in the correct format. And then the next thing is when you put it in the browser. So I can build an HTML script, put a button on it, and then I can open that up in my browser. I don't need to necessarily host that anywhere. Open up the developer tools, see what types of interactions we're getting. So for me, that was a big part of, um, uh, and that was a big part of testing code, is seeing how it actually interacted in the browser, what errors I got, and then what the output was to the LRS. Um, oh yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at Carlton's question. Our challenge is implementing xAPI in a LMS environment and separate video hosting platform. Okay, so part of that might be where the videos live. So I've looked at Vimeo, and I have not been able to kind of crack that open, and they are they ask for like a premium account for their data, but I would love to know if anyone has kind of like been able to like Wistia, Vimeo, like get xAPI out of that. Um, Kaltura, so there are tools out there that are doing xAPI support. Um, but yeah, part of this is going to be where is that video hosted? And so that's one of the questions that often doesn't get asked. So people will talk, or a video creation platform will talk about, ease of use and being able to upload content really easily. What they sometimes don't hear a lot about is that interoperability piece. So can I get data from one site, and can I compare it to another site? That's where like AWS became like a nice alternative for us, because we were able to post the video, host it, link out to it, embed it, put it in an iframe, get that interaction data, and then we could then easily compare what's showing up in our LRS with what's showing up in our LMS. And so that became a really helpful solution. So we've got about a minute left. I'm going to go ahead and thank you again for taking the time to join this session. I really hope that this was helpful. If there's any additional questions, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I would love to hear from people about what their journey's been like and the challenges, but also successes that you're facing. But most importantly, take care and be safe.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Wonderful presentation. We're going to pop up a quick evaluation.